You've probably heard the familiar refrain, "Stick to sports," whenever someone from the sports world ventures into political territory. Critics argue that sports media, particularly the industry giant ESPN, has grown increasingly political and even biased in recent years. But how accurate is this perception? In this video, we'll explore ESPN's history and examine how the network has navigated the complex intersection of sports and politics over time. In 1979, a groundbreaking idea emerged from an unlikely source: a fired New England Whalers hockey broadcaster and his son. Bill and Scott Rasmussen, along with Ed Hagen, envisioned something revolutionary: a television network dedicated entirely to sports, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At a time when major networks like CBS and NBC offered only weekend sports coverage and brief evening highlights, this seemed almost absurd. Operating out of a small trailer in Bristol, Connecticut, they launched the Entertainment and Sports Programming Network, ESPN, a venture that would fundamentally transform how Americans consume sports. Their ambitious vision, delivering everything from Major League games to Australian rules football, filled a void that many didn't even realize existed. In its infancy, ESPN was far from the politically charged entity some perceive it to be today. The network's sole mission was to captivate sports enthusiasts around the clock, a concept that filled viewers with excitement rather than political debate. As the very first broadcast kicked off on September 7, 1979, with a slow-pitch softball game between the Milwaukee Schlitz and the Kentucky Bourbons, the launch theme proudly proclaimed total sports and entertainment. This rallying cry encapsulated ESPN's apolitical ambition: to be the ultimate destination for sports lovers, leaving room for nothing else but the joy of the game. ESPN rapidly fulfilled its founder's vision, transforming from a fledgling network into a national powerhouse through its revolutionary 24/7 sports coverage and roster of memorable personalities. The network's early success was largely driven by charismatic hosts like Chris Berman, whose signature catchphrases,
"He could go all the way,"
and playful nicknames, Andre Bad Moon Rison, became part of sports culture. Bob Lay brought gravitas as the original SportsCenter anchor, while Dick Vitale's enthusiastic "It's awesome, baby" became synonymous with college basketball coverage. Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick's witty SportsCenter partnership in the 1990s, dubbed The Big Show, revolutionized sports broadcasting with their clever wordplay and sophisticated humor. Tom Mees, Gail Gardner, and Robin Roberts broke ground as some of the network's first prominent broadcasters, helping establish ESPN's reputation for both entertainment and credible journalism. This combination of comprehensive sports coverage and engaging personalities transformed ESPN from a small Connecticut startup into the worldwide leader in sports.
Hello once again, everybody. This is not CNN. This is the ESPN Sports Center. What is that voice? Who is this guy? I'm not Nick Charles. I'm Chris Berman, and we'd like to welcome into our fold from CNN, coming over here to the Sports Center, Dan Patrick, and I'm sure you will enjoy him as maybe you did before at some other place. Welcome aboard, pal.
Thank you, Chris. It doesn't get any better than this. That's why I changed area codes.
On the last day of the NBA regular season, the scoring race between Shaquille O'Neal and David Robinson was as tight as a ring on a fat guy's finger. Shaq, the Diesel, led Robinson by 6/100ths of a point going into the last day. The Spurs played first, so Robinson knew that he had to have a big game, but he had mad game.
In its early days, ESPN maintained a strict focus on sports, rarely venturing beyond the playing field. When they did step outside those boundaries, it was usually to cover how the sports world responded to major national events, always keeping political opinions at arm's length. Take their coverage following September 11th, 2001, for instance. As leagues postponed games in the wake of the terrorist attacks, ESPN's reporting stuck to the facts, avoiding any commentary about political leaders or their policies.
Major League Baseball postponed its games on Tuesday. The National Football League is still assessing its options for the week ahead. Spokesman Joe Brown said Tuesday afternoon that no decision will be made on Tuesday and that the league will gather information and speak to several parties within the next 24 to 48 hours.
A prime example is the network's coverage of Colin Kaepernick, the 49ers' backup quarterback, who knelt during the national anthem to protest racial injustice. This sparked a debate among ESPN commentators Trent Dilfer and Charles Woodson, who held differing opinions on the appropriateness of Kaepernick's protest. Dilfer argued that the timing of the gesture was unsuitable, whereas Woodson saw it as a chance to address social issues. The exchange remained respectful, with ESPN providing ample airtime for both perspectives to be shared.
And I think Colin used very poor judgment in when he chose to make this honorable stand for something he's passionate about.
I actually applaud having the gall to stand up when he knew what kind of ridicule he was going to get, when most people would not do it.
ESPN still frames most political coverage through a sports perspective, though signs of bias occasionally seep through. Consider their handling of Murphy versus NCAA 2018, the Supreme Court decision that opened the door for nationwide sports betting. While their coverage primarily focused on the ruling's impact on leagues, athletes, and fans, subtle preferences emerged in how different commentators presented the information. Some enthusiastically endorsed the gambling expansion, while others expressed concerns about game integrity. This illustrates a growing challenge for ESPN, maintaining objectivity while covering issues that increasingly blur the lines between sports, politics, and business interests. Unlike their earlier coverage of major events, these newer discussions often reveal the network's evolving editorial stance, even when they avoid direct political commentary.
But you can't tell me those 32 owners in the NFL, those 32 billionaires have not gotten together, led by our very own, probably Jerry Jones, because they understand they're going to find a way to monetize this. Now, maybe they're slow playing this thing, they're not jumping out in front of it, but they're going to slow play this thing and they're going to figure it out.
However, there have been other instances where political conversations on ESPN are biased towards one side, particularly on the left. Following the tragic Uvalde school shooting, ESPN chose to focus its coverage squarely on athletes advocating for stricter gun laws, aligning with a traditionally left-wing stance. The network highlighted the public statements and actions of these athletes, dedicating airtime to their calls for legislative change. However, this one-sided approach neglected to present any counter-arguments or perspectives from those who might oppose such measures. The network heavily featured Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr's emotional pregame press conference, where he pounded the table and declared, "I'm tired of the moments of silence. Enough. And when are we going to do something?" ESPN analysts like Stephen A. Smith praised Kerr's stance, stating, "This is what leadership looks like, and we need more voices like Steve Kerr's in sports." Fellow commentator Michael Wilbon added, "There's no other side to discuss when we're talking about children being murdered in schools." While these perspectives on gun control aligned with progressive positions, the network notably excluded voices like former NFL player Burgess Owens or other athletes who advocated for different approaches to school safety or defended Second Amendment rights. By emphasizing only one side of this highly divisive issue, ESPN's coverage veered into advocacy territory, potentially alienating viewers who hold different beliefs about gun control. While the emotional power of athletes using their platforms to push for change is undeniable, a truly objective news organization should strive to present the full spectrum of opinions on such a complex topic. The absence of opposing viewpoints in ESPN's Uvalde reporting raises questions about the network's evolving editorial stance and whether its commitment to sports coverage can coexist with increasingly opinionated takes on social and political matters. As ESPN's personalities weigh in on issues far removed from the playing field, the line between reporting and activism grows increasingly blurred. Navigating this balance will be crucial for the network to maintain credibility with its diverse viewership moving forward.
It's pretty difficult to talk about sports today. We'll do it anyway as part of our job, and we'll do that later on. It's very, very difficult. Let me crystallize it for us even more. It is important that we recognize that no one is engaging in hyperbole as they express themselves emotionally.
Similar examples of ESPN's shifting editorial stance include their coverage of the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 and the aftermath of the January 6th United States Capitol attack. During the height of racial justice protests following the murder of George Floyd, ESPN prominently featured athletes like LeBron James, who tweeted, "We are being hunted every day, justice for George Floyd," and gave extensive coverage to the Milwaukee Bucks' decision to boycott playoff games. Analyst Jalen Rose emotionally declared on air, "This isn't a political issue, this is a humanitarian issue," while host Maria Taylor praised athlete activism, saying, "Sports can no longer just be an escape from reality." However, ESPN largely avoided voices from sports figures like Drew Brees, who faced backlash after initially stating, "I will never agree with anybody disrespecting the flag of the United States of America or our country." Despite the complex, multifaceted nature of the movement, ESPN's coverage leaned distinctly toward supporting BLM and downplayed alternative perspectives within the sports world. Likewise, when covering the January 6th United States Capitol attack, ESPN focused on the reactions of athletes and sports leagues, many of whom condemned the violence and expressed support for democracy. The network highlighted responses like LeBron James, who criticized elected officials with posts like, "This is what happens when you incite a riot. Y'all got him out of office, but not out of power." ESPN analysts like NFL expert Mina Kimes provided commentary, declaring, "The parallels between the Capitol riots and professional sports handling of player activism are striking." Additionally, Draymond Green was covered closely when he said, "They're not expletive protesters, they're terrorists." Violence of this kind should never be accepted. It's important to recognize that much of the quotes were taken from left-leaning athletes and commentators. This selective reporting suggested an emerging editorial tilt, even on issues theoretically distinct from sports, potentially shaping viewers' understanding of these complex events.
And now it is time for all of us, athletes, coaches, and media, to do our part to make this country better.
Sports are a mirror for who we are, and right now we are hurt, and we are tired, and we are broken. But we are also still moving forward. That hope that one day things will be better. Sometimes despite years of failure, that is of course one of the prime parts of being a sports fan, and a reflection of who we are as humans too.
ESPN's evolution toward political discourse has been both deliberate and circumstantial. In 2016, ESPN's public editor Jim Brady outlined this transformation, noting, "The days of stick to sports are over." He cited social media's influence, which gave ESPN personalities unprecedented platforms for personal expression, and the rise of debate shows like First Take, where Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless regularly ventured beyond traditional sports analysis. The pandemic and George Floyd protests in 2020 accelerated this shift dramatically. With sports suspended, ESPN found itself covering athletes' responses to social upheaval. NBA star Jaylen Brown, who drove 15 hours to lead protests in Atlanta, told ESPN, "First and foremost, I'm a black man and I'm a member of this community." While ESPN's hosts like Maria Taylor emphasized, "This isn't just about sports anymore." When faced with accusations of liberal bias, ESPN has taken a firm stance. The network's official response stated, "It is accurate that the Walt Disney Company and ESPN are committed to diversity and inclusion. We do not view this as a political stance, but as a human stance. We do not think tolerance is the domain of a particular political philosophy." Network president Jimmy Pitaro further defended their approach in 2020, saying, "When sports and politics collide, we cover the intersection objectively. The key is understanding the difference between activism and journalism." This position reflects ESPN's broader understanding that sports have historically been intertwined with social change, from Jackie Robinson breaking baseball's color barrier to Muhammad Ali's anti-war stance. The network maintains that their coverage of these intersections isn't about choosing political sides, but rather documenting how athletics and society inevitably overlap in meaningful ways. According to Biasly, ESPN leans left in its biases. It has somewhat liberal bias score with an average reliability rating. These findings are consistent with the examples we've shown in this video. For more information on Biasly's rating on ESPN and other media sources, check out biasly.com.